After working in human services for many years, my career shifted to writing and administering grants. For over 13 years, I wrote local, state, and federal grants ranging from $500 to several $1 million with a success rate of over 80%. As the executive director and sole grant writer of a nonprofit agency, I wrote and received $5.9 million in grants. I've also served as a federal grant reviewer for 4 departments, and I reviewed and scored over 31 million in national grant applications. I became interested in grants early in my career when I was working with homeless, runaway, and gang-involved teenagers and low-income families. I quickly learned the importance of gathering data and having realistic and attainable goals for programs. I realized I wanted to be the person who was developing and designing the programs. Soon after that, I had to write a couple paragraphs about the work we were doing for upcoming grants, and that is how my career in grant writing began. A question you may have is, do I need to have a college degree to be a grant writer? No, a college degree is not necessary to get started. However, as you build your grant writing business, you may find that you want or need a degree to increase your credibility. College helps students develop research skills, study habits, juggle several tasks simultaneously, time management, and the ability to quickly prioritize. Those are the same skills you need to be successful at grant writing. If you are thinking about a career and wondering, is grant writing for me? Or if you are relatively new to grant writing and hoping to improve your knowledge and abilities, there are key skills and strengths you need to have. The following list provides key skills and strengths you need at the basic level. I've also included abilities you will need for the intermediate and advanced levels, so as your skills increase, you can challenge yourself and move on to state and federal grants. Grant writers understand they are competing with others and need to get the most points possible. They are organized, thorough, and great at details and documentation. Of course, some rejections are a little upsetting, and each grant is a gamble. You can't take rejection personally. You just need to move on to the next application. Grant deadlines are strict and non-negotiable, and it is rare for a due date to be extended. And a grant writer needs to be able to handle large amounts of stress. A good grant writer can read through the RFP, understand what the funder is looking for, and is then able to answer the questions. For local grants, there is not a lot of research, maybe just one local statistic from a recent newspaper article. Writing and budgeting skills are essential. Research and creating charts and graphs is more important at the state and federal levels. A grant writer needs to be able to juggle many moving and changing pieces and know how to prioritize them. If you like creating, envisioning, or planning, that is a perfect mindset to have when writing a grant. Influencing how others view an agency's work is a big part of grant writing. How you write will sell your idea or plan. Do you believe in what you are writing about? Are you passionate about the program or services provided by the agency? Networking will help you get grants, and building collaborations is needed for state and federal grants and may be useful for local grants too. Grant writing is a learned skill that takes a lot of practice. No grant writer starts off and gets 100% of the grants they write. When you are first starting out, you want to save everything you write in a Word document. Things like the mission statement and history of the agency will probably not change that often. Keeping them in a Word document allows you to copy and paste into other applications. You want to save all budgets in Excel spreadsheets and revise as needed. Since most grants are available to nonprofits, to build your skills and gain experience, you may want to volunteer for a local nonprofit agency that has been in business for 2 or more years. Most nonprofits would be thrilled to have a volunteer helping them with grants. You can volunteer, write a couple small grants for them, and increase your skills, confidence, and experience. If you do a great job, it could potentially turn into a contract or a part-time or full-time position. Usually people need to write a number of grants before they develop their own pattern. For me, since I was normally writing several grants around the same time, I figured out certain things I worked on first to help me save time. I will share those secrets with you a bit further into the webinar when we get into time-saving tips. When developing your own pattern, pay attention to what makes you lose time versus what helps you be more focused, organized, and save time. Larger organizations have a team approach to writing grants. One person may have the ideas for what the project or program should do and how it should be implemented. Another person may be in charge of assembling the documents needed or writing the actual answers in the application. And another may develop the budget. If you have a team that will work on grants together, it is important to identify who will be responsible for each part and what the completion time should be. Grants need to answer three basic questions. What problem in the community will you be addressing? If you are awarded the funding, what specifically will you do to help solve that problem? As in, what program, project, or services will you provide? And why should the funder give money to your organization instead of giving it to another? The RFP may not ask these questions specifically, but those are the three concepts reviewers are contemplating as they review the applications. As you write to answer those three basic questions, your grant application also needs to be a balancing act. First, the problem your program will address needs to be a cause or giving area that the funder is interested in supporting. You want to state the problem, but not make it too overwhelming or hopeless. You want to state you have the solution and make it realistic. And you want to demonstrate that your agency's prior experience and abilities are the best to get the work done. Here's a secret. It's the most important concept, and it is something I want you to keep in mind as you write a grant. Ideally, you should write goals that are realistic and completely within reach. And ideally, when your agency implements the program, you want to exceed those goals. So the most important concept is to write goals you know your agency will not only be able to meet, but will also be able to exceed. It's a guaranteed win-win for your agency and the funder. You never want to write a grant that overpromises or underperform for a grant that has been awarded. Overpromising will either guarantee you don't get the funding or your agency's inability to meet the goals will quickly destroy a relationship with a funder. Most grant reviewers are chosen because they are knowledgeable about the types of programs or services local agencies provide. They will instantly spot if the goals you list in the application are unrealistic or overpromising. You want to over-deliver, not over-promise. This is a true story. Early in my career, I took a job as an executive director and led a nonprofit agency that was not doing well financially and was about to close its doors. The previous grant writer wrote a grant stating the homeless clients were going to have computers, each building was going to have computers, and the clients were going to serve on all the local nonprofit boards. At the time, the staff didn't even have computers. Yes, I would have loved to keep that grant since the agency couldn't pay its bills, but accepting it would have been lying that we could accomplish what I knew was not true. Plus, the money didn't make sense. The grant was not going to pay for the computers for the clients or the buildings, it was to fund something else. So why accept a grant that would make the agency go further into debt? I contacted the funder, explained the situation, and stated we could not accept the award. The goals and program or services that you state you will accomplish in the grant application is a promise. It is important to be honest. If you get the grant and find you cannot meet what you said you were going to do, it is important to inform the funder right away. Funders want to know what progress you are making, if there are any obstacles, and what you are doing to overcome those hurdles. They may even have ideas of how you can adjust or tweak your program. I wrote and received a $1.75 million grant to provide outreach services to homeless women, including several different minority groups. One of those groups was the Chinese community. Outreach was provided in Mandarin and Cantonese. I hired a street outreach worker, ran ads in the local Chinese newspaper, and had signs. But we could only reach a few clients. I was disappointed and notified the funder that we could not reach our goal. What surprised me was the funder knew the target population would be difficult to engage and was thrilled with the efforts and progress we had made. They offered extra training, encouraged us to revise the outreach a bit, and the support was very helpful. In the end, they were so happy with our work that they showcased our program with huge displays in the lobby of one of the government buildings, so all federal employees would see it as they made their way to their offices each morning. So why do we not want to overpromise or underdeliver? And why would we tell a funder if we were struggling to meet the goals we promised? Because we want the funder to know they can trust us. As with any relationship, trust is the key. The funder needs to feel secure knowing that the agency is honest, will deliver on every goal that was listed in the application, and if not able to meet the goals, the funder knows the agency did their best. I want to give you a glimpse of what it's like being a grant reviewer. In the past, grant applications were mailed or submitted by dropping off a packet. It would then be in a pile with many other applications. Now, most applications are submitted online, which is easier for the grant writer, but it means the funder will probably receive many more applications than in the past. With limited dollars to give, it is stressful for reviewers to make final decisions of who should receive funding. Once received, your application will be shared electronically or given as printed packets to a group of people who will review the applications. Ideally, the reviewers are given a scoring system to determine which grants should be funded. If a funder is interested but needs some clarification or some changes to your application, there may be a negotiation period before an award is made, and they could potentially ask if you could still implement the program with less money. This is an example of the negotiation period. I had written a grant to fund a recovery housing program for women. The program did not allow any drug or alcohol use. I was contacted that we were one of the 2 agencies in the state that was potentially receiving a grant, but the funder wanted to meet in person to discuss the proposal. They asked if we could accept women who were on methadone. As an agency, we were able to make that change. The grant was awarded and continued for many years. If a grant is accepted, you will usually receive an award letter or email. Some funders will also expect an agreement or contract to be signed and returned before they send the funds. The funder will typically want to announce that they funded the project. They may send a press release to the local newspapers, or they may post information on their website or social media platforms. Your agency will then want to post the funder's announcement through your social media outlets. There'll be plenty of slides on what to do, so I want to focus on things not to do. Don't chase money. Many times businesses get desperate for money and they chase after any grants they can, which may not be in line with their mission. This weakens the agency and confuses funders. Don't apply just to apply. Your application is your agency's reputation. If you send in a poorly written application, it shows. Don't rush. You want to impress the reviewers, not disappoint or scare them. As you write a grant, remember you are writing for the people who will review your application. Is your project interesting? Is it compelling? Put yourself in the reviewer's shoes. Did you explain everything in a clear manner? Did you give too much information? The last thing you want to do is bore the reviewers. The RFP is the format you want to follow. Adding more is not good. Anything other than their format or attachments that were not requested can disqualify you. Keep in mind, reviewers are trying to get the biggest bang for their buck and they may be looking at the cost per client. If you request $5,000 to work with 10 children, your application may not compare well with an agency requesting $5,000 to work with 100 children. Or maybe the funder is looking for a more intensive program to serve a smaller number of people. If the funder advertises how many people have been served by other programs they have supported, they care about cost per client. Another thing to consider is your overall presentation. Besides getting things in on time and giving everything the funder asks for, is it written well? Are you submitting something that is easy to understand, organized, and professionally put together? Do your attachments agree with what you listed in the narrative? Each time I was serving as a federal reviewer and scoring applications from across the country, I could easily spot who hired a professional grant writer and who didn't. A key to successful grant writing and being able to write several grants per month is making sure you have enough time. In the next few slides, I give you some of the strategies I use. The first thing I look for is the funder's priorities and ineligible activities, which are usually listed on their website or in the RFP. If the program or services I am seeking funding for is in line with their priorities, I stay interested. If the project is similar to their ineligible activities, I move on to a different opportunity. Once you've decided that your project is in line with the funder's priorities, the next thing you want to do is read the entire RFP before you start doing any work. I normally print it out and jot down notes as I start to formulate ideas in my head. Most local grants have an RFP that is a few pages, so within a few minutes you can read through and start strategizing. State and federal RFPs are more involved and can easily be over 40 pages long. For those, I normally use sticky notes to mark specific sections. Some grants require a letter of intent before you can apply. A letter of intent is a brief one-page letter on your agency's letterhead that gets submitted to the foundation. In your request for their funds, you are writing a mini proposal. The 3 questions I mentioned earlier need to be answered: why you need the funds, what you will do with the money if awarded, and why your agency is the best. If they like your proposal, you will then be invited to submit a full application. The top 3 things I look for in an RFP are the due date, is the agency eligible to apply, and is there a matching funds requirement. If the agency is eligible to apply, I then set a goal for myself to finish and submit the grant 2 to 3 days before it is due. Matching funds normally applies to state or federal grants. Some grants require a 25% match or more, which means for every dollar they give, your agency needs to contribute that specific percent as direct, indirect, or in kind. Direct costs are expenses that allow you to provide the program or services. Indirect costs are the expenses that support the program behind the scenes, and in kind is a voluntary or free contribution. An example is an after-school program to teach teenagers a foreign language. The teacher and program supplies are direct costs. The insurance for the building could be an indirect cost. A mom volunteers and speaks to the kids in her language, which would be an in-kind contribution. The last thing I look for in the RFP is if a contact person is listed. If one is listed, I check if it encourages questions. If it looks like they want potential applicants reaching out to the contact person, you definitely want to do that. Once you've formulated your grant proposal in your head, call the contact person, introduce yourself, explain the potential project, and ask if they would consider funding it. If the RFP does not encourage questions, do not contact anyone before submitting an application. Whatever the due date, always plan that you want to be done with the grant at least 2 to 3 days before it is due. You always want to start sooner than later. Also, you want to be ready for the unexpected. Almost every time I was working on a large state or federal grant, one of the printers would stop working. I always made sure I had 2 or 3 printers with scanners that were easily accessible. For local grants, you will usually need a printer and a scanner. Make sure it is ready to go. I am a very honest and transparent person, but if you need things from other people, such as a signed application or a budget or a chart or graph, you need to fib a little for when the grant is due. If you tell them the true date the grant is due, they will return the documents on that date. They don't understand or realize you need time to assemble the grant and explain the document they are providing. Never tell others when the grant is due. Tell them the date you need the items returned by. Another time-related item I look for is who needs to sign the application. When I was the executive director of a nonprofit agency, I signed all the grant applications that I wrote, so it was easy. I wasn't losing any time getting signatures. But if I needed the board president or treasurer to sign the application, that would take up more time, and I needed to plan for it. Some applications also require a notarized form, which can potentially make you lose days. Sometimes grant opportunities appear and are due right away. While the money and potential to implement a new program sound exciting, you do not want to set yourself up for a heart attack or waste time on grants that are unrealistic to put together, and you never want to throw together a poorly written application. You have to evaluate the situation and be honest with yourself. Do you realistically have enough time to write the grant? If you know you don't have enough time, don't apply.